Attack on Titan has one of the most well-written and executed stories of all time. As a point of clarification, I'm not saying for an anime, I'm saying as a very general blanket statement. Now let me explain why. Taking a look at something like Game of Thrones, one of the most appealing aspects of the show was how muddy the moral waters were. It wasn't black and white, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. There were not obvious choices that people should be making. There were constant betrayals, shocking moments, and you were always left on the edge of your seat because you never really knew what was coming. This is also true of Attack on Titan. The mystique and intrigue that the show brings in, watching Attack on Titan, you start off with this feeling that these are the good guys, there's obviously these bad guys coming to kill the good guys, and black and white, they need to defeat the oncoming enemy. And slowly as the story unfolds, you find new bad guys who you may have thought were good guys to begin with. And then you find the bad guys are not nearly what you thought they were either. And then you find that the quote-unquote good guys may not be the quote-unquote good guys after all. By the end of the first half of the 4th season, I'm left with this incredibly muddied waters where there really are no good guys. Even the people that I'm supporting most, there's a very good argument that they are not in the right. And the people that they're fighting against, again, are not all in the wrong. The story does a great job at keeping all expectations tempered, keeping everybody on the same playing field where no one is so far to the good or so far to the bad, but you can genuinely see the justification for so many of the actions being taken. And I would argue that the way it's written leaves it to be a work of art in that sphere. I was constantly being led in different directions, where very often I would either A, have no idea what was going on in the background, or B, would think I knew what was going on and the game would just shatter that reality for me. The story has this way of sort of breadcrumb feeding you bits and pieces about the story constantly so that you're never starving, but you're always hungry. And it also never ended up getting to the point for me where I felt like they were purposefully slow feeding me information, but rather it felt incredibly organic. And I never questioned to myself, why didn't they tell me this sooner? I was simply going, wow, that's how that works. Because a new character or a new perspective yielded so much more information about the entirety of the world and how things ended up descending to the point that they did. The story also does an incredible job making the situations that you deal with feel hopeless and bleak. I find in anime is very often this sort of superhero complex where the main character or characters are always superhero-like, coming to save the day, I'm gonna do it on willpower alone. And while I don't think that that's a terrible aspect, I find that it's left as a crutch for a lot of shows. Attack on Titan has this way of making you feel like that's exactly what's about to happen. And then when faced with the chaos and the challenge directly in front of them, that entire idea is burnt to the ground as you'll witness people being killed off and lost, whereas a second ago you thought for sure they were going to be able to come and save the day. I think that Attack on Titan handles loss in a way that leaves their audience so angry and upset that they feel like they're actually in the world and those were people they knew, despite just being characters on a screen. Adding on to this, the team does an excellent job of helping you to become invested in every single character they introduce. Characters that are there for just a couple of episodes or there for multiple seasons, their stories and backgrounds, how they directly affect the story itself, the lies they may have told, the true things they may have done, etc., really help you to become completely invested in each and every one of them. The best example I can give of the show making you invested in the characters comes from actually the very first episode. So in the very first episode, you begin to see an attack on the main character's home, whose name is Eren. In a desperate moment, his mother is actually stuck under a collapsed house. As a young kid, Eren is desperately trying to free his mother, lifting off the broken down home, but is unable to because he's not strong enough. His mother is completely heartbroken, trying to convince him to just go on without her so that he isn't killed along with her. You can feel the emotion from both her voice and his determination, making it very obvious that he was going nowhere. While she's pleading with him to leave, an adult shows up and says, "I'll take care of this. No one needs to run and no one's going to die." He then goes to approach the oncoming threat. After you feel this buildup, knowing for sure that he's going to come save the day, the adult is overcome with mortal fear, turns around, grabs Aaron, and bolts. And then in a moment, you watch his mother eaten alive by the oncoming threat. For a character that I've seen in one episode, the amount of emotion and feelings and sadness that just creep over me during this entire scene is incredibly impressive. The show does such a great job at making you care about each and every character, regardless of how often you see them and how relevant they end up being, while also avoiding this habit that I've seen other animes get into, where they have these, and you can kind of feel that they're just filler episodes that want to explain something about a character's backstory. And usually I find them significantly less interesting than the main episodes themselves, which is usually something I'm just like, well, I'm gonna skip to the next one because I'm bored. I never had that experience. Even when you do see a bit about a character's backstory, it's filled with the same level of quality, polish, emotion, and interest that you would see during the rest of the show. Something that really helps sell the tone and passion of the show is the great music choices. From different choirs, bands, and otherwise, the show's music is top-notch. It really sells the different emotions that you're going through, sort of enhancing them, making you feel completely immersed in the music and in the story and in the atmosphere. Something that the music really helps with, being the atmosphere. I also do think the voice acting for the show is fantastic. I pretty rarely go, wow, that was kind of off, or that was kind of weird. It seems very polished and high quality, and something that you can tell the team put a lot of time into and did not rush through just to get it done. The voice acting itself does a great job relaying the character's emotions very well, and in seemingly a raw way where it doesn't detract from what I'm seeing on screen. It's relayed both vocally and visually for the audience to enjoy. Another trap that turns me off, pun intended, that the show avoids is leaning on sex as a crutch for good writing. I find that a number of animes lean on sex to either be funny or interesting, to make a character seem more interesting than they are, and for me personally, it never quite clicks. It usually disconnects me from the show, waiting to get back to the good part, the story. Thankfully, I have not had any experience where Attack on Titan did that. They have some goofy moments where a character's attracted to another, but it's not over-exaggerated to the point that it sticks out from the actual story and what's going on within. I also really enjoy that it doesn't have so many divine intervention moments where the character is saved from a life-threatening, obvious death scenario, and something out of left field completely comes to save the characters. I don't mind these occasionally in a story, especially as it suits the story and fits very well within explaining pieces of what's going on. But when it seems to come constantly for characters multiple times this season, it sort of detracts from the severity of the situation and the actual feeling of life-threatening environment that the characters are living in. Speaking of environment, I actually find that the visuals are fairly well done. While there are certainly animes that have better visuals than Attack on Titan, I do think that Attack on Titan does a great job with their visuals, whether it's selling the atmosphere, it's selling some of the smaller, finer points, making the combat feel very quick-paced and sort of making the audience anxious by what they're seeing on screen, as if they're in the environments themselves and in the situations themselves. It also does a great job at selling just how dire a lot of these situations are and feel. I also really like how the character design develops with the characters throughout the course of the show. As they get older and wiser and adjust because of their circumstances, you can see that on their face, on their vocals, by the choices they make. The show doesn't need to tell you that they're different. This is a pet peeve of mine when shows either feel like their audience is not smart enough to figure it out for themselves, or they themselves are not equipped to write in a way that can naturally inform the audience that something has changed for the character. And very often you'll hear, wow, you seem different now. You're not the same you were before. If I had $1 for every time I heard that in an anime, I would have bought a house with that money. That's how often I see it, and I pretty much have never seen it in Attack on Titan to my memory. I also really enjoy how I feel like I can trust absolutely no one. Anyone can be a threat. Anyone could have turned on me. And it's not really something the show just throws on you. It almost feels like this revelation reveals itself to you bit by bit as you go through the show, learning more and not quite understanding more, feeling like every time you take a step forward, you've really taken sort of 2 steps backward, not really knowing who to trust and who's your genuine ally. I really enjoy this feeling. The last topic I want to speak on as to why this may be one of the best shows ever written, at least in terms of story, is just how great their alluding to things is. So something I find in a lot of shows is they spell out too much of what's going on so that whoever's watching the show can all too easily piece together what's going to happen, as well as what's already happening all on their own. And while this can be a good thing, I find that shows do it way too heavily. They're a bit too heavy-handed with it, making it so that it's incredibly predictable. I have not found that to be the case with this show. And as a matter of fact, after watching all the way up to the 4th season, and then re-watching the show, because of what I know now, I can actually see just how unrecognizable their alluding is within the show. And it's brilliant. I'm going to give you an example that's incredibly vague so that it ruins nothing for anybody, especially if I'm right. I think I know how the show ends because of a very easily missed piece of information from the very first episode. And I'm incredibly excited to see if that's what happens or something I, once again, cannot predict happens. It makes me feel like I'm a conspiracy theorist with how out there a lot of their alluding to information is, and I love it. Now, this was the last topic I wanted to cover for this video. The final episodes for the show are coming out in not too long, so if you haven't seen this show yet and you want to sort of get prepared for when it does come out, I highly recommend it. This is my favorite anime of all time, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, consider subscribing. Stay safe out there.